Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Diane Allen, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action. A gifted father raising gifted sons. That's what today is about. And I have Chuck Kentis back with me today because he's willing to talk about this really important topic. Now, we all know that Someone Gets Me is for primarily gifted people, and I'm really fascinated with relationships with gifted people, especially in families. Now, Chuck, you've heard Chuck already on the show. He was episode number 238, I believe, and you got to hear all about his music career. And you got to hear, well, not all about it. You got to hear a really good taste about it. There was much more we didn't get to cover. And he's a really cool guy. So, Chuck, thank you for coming to the show again, being willing to talk about being a father of gifted boys.
Thank you, Diane. It's great to be here again. I appreciate you asking me. I had a lot of fun last time. And this is definitely a subject I'm very passionate about. I thank you for that. I think this should be really good.
Yes, I'm excited. So this show is not because either one of us are educators. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a mentor. Chuck is a well-known musician and a very talented one at that, who has a musical career with two adult sons who are in the arts. So we're not coming at you with diagnoses or any of that kind of thing. This is a candid conversation between two people who really want to just share some information about what is it like to be a father of gifted boys in the real, practical, everyday world out there making it through. So that's the point of the show. And Chuck is willing to talk about this because he sees the importance in it as well. So let's start a little bit with set the stage, like of your boy when you had the boys, when you first became a dad. What was that all like? How old were you? Like, what was happening? What was your life like when these beautiful little beings came into existence?
Me and my wife, Case, were living in New Jersey at the time in Clifton, which is right next door to Passaic, where I was born. So it's North Jersey. It's about 8 miles outside of Manhattan into the Lincoln Tunnel. So I was living there, and I had been working with Rod on the road for, about 6 years or so that I had been with them, and I was touring a lot. And we had Avery in May of '94, and then Noah came along in March of '97. So much credit has to be given to her raising these kids on her own. On her own, meaning that I'm traveling like maybe 6-7 months out of the year. I'm on the road, but the good thing was when I was home, I was able to, I was home, like, I could be there for day, night for, a month or two. And then I worked from home to a studio at home, and I would write music for, TV or production music and stuff. But so they were born there, and it was kind of that we moved when they were getting ready to start school. Like Avery was being of kindergarten age. Mm-hmm. And Rod had said, he goes, you should move out to California. There was about 3 or 4 of us who were East Coast people, and the rest of the guys in the band were out of LA, Right. So and I had spent a lot of time in LA if records were being recorded or rehearsals before I even went on the road. So I was spending time out there preparing for stuff. So he said, why don't you move out to California? And we looked at it because the school system that Avery would have started at wasn't that great. And so we moved to California. We said, let's find a place where, LA County has a really good school system. We wound up moving to Woodland Hills, buying a place here. And they both started in that school system, which was really highly rated. And Avery, when we moved here, started kindergarten, and Noah started at a preschool across the street. And so as they were growing up, they made some, it's interesting because the friends that they made that they're still friends with are all in the creative fields. A lot of them grew up to be in the creative, so they kind of gravitated together, and I'm sure they influenced each other in ways like that. Some of their parents were in the entertainment business, or some of them weren't. They were in different fields and stuff, but they kind of gravitated toward that. Avery, when I was home, I had a studio in New Jersey, and before he could talk or walk or anything like that, he would be crawling around my studio and stuff, and so that was kind of going in to his ears and things like that, and Noah the same way. So I would play different types of music. I my listening would go all over, jazz, classical, to, ancient music, to, just everywhere, the different tastes that I had. So, they were exposed to that at a young age, and so when they kind of went into their teens, like I remember both of them, the moments that I'd see the spark happen. And with Avery, and then we moved out to California. So here, that's where I'm at, in my studio here. And Avery would come in, and they weren't, they're kids. They weren't interested in music. What they did do start first when they were like maybe 10 or something like that, they started making their own movies. And they had, they'd take the video camera, and they'd have all their friends, and they would script it out, and they would have a story behind it, and make their own films and stuff like that, just for fun, But they did that a lot. And they both were playing, as far as sports, they were both playing ice hockey. Yeah, moved to California and play ice hockey.
From New Jersey to California, and then they start playing ice hockey. Okay, that makes total sense.
But it was like, one of their friends were playing, and so we signed them both up, and
right.
And that was great for them, because it was something that they were playing, any sport, to learn, sportsmanship, and work, with other kids, and how to, take defeat and practice, and all of those things, I think, are very good disciplines to learn for a kid. So, but anyway, the moment that, like, Avery, I forget how old he was, he'd come into my studio and listen to stuff. And I remember I had on Emerson, Lake and Palmer album that we were listening to, and, you would start to come in and listen to different music. And I have my Mini Moog synthesizer, which is the same one that I bought in 1971. And I remember going to the bank and getting a loan to buy the synthesizer. I think it was like $1,800 or something like that. And I still have it. And he wanted to hear it, so he took it out and put it. He was sitting right over there. And I hooked it up, and he started playing it, and he was listening to Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I just saw it just all pop, like, in his head at that moment. And then he was grabbed, And it's funny because that Emerson, Lake and Palmer is what really grabbed me when I was like in 8th grade or something like that. So it grabbed him, and it's really kind of interesting. Keith, unfortunately, is gone. He passed away about eight years ago or something. So, but we got to meet him down at the NAMM convention, which is the musical instruments. It's a big convention that for musical instrument makers and sellers, and all of that. And he was always, he was there because of the Moog area.
Right.
He was like so we got to meet him and talk, and I take pictures with him and stuff like that. So it's fun because it was both of our kind of like introduction into that, and through that, Keith Emerson, it was what introduced me to like Aaron Copland and Tchaikovsky and the things that he, Mussorgsky, all the music that he was rearranging for his, for playing within that band, and then to go and listen to the orchestral arrangements of, Billy the Kid and Rodeo and Appalachian Spring and Pictures at an Exhibition. And so, and then Avery gets introduced to that at the same time. So we're listening to the original orchestral versions of that. So he started going into, when he was in high school, he got into the band and wanted to go in the percussion department, and wound up on mallets, which is great because mallets is music. It's not a drum where it's just rat-tat-tat-tat, you're learning rhythms, but in mallets, you're learning how to read music because it's the same as a keyboard. It's the same way. So if you have vibes or marimbas or xylophones, you're playing keyboards, and it's a whole nother technique because you have 4 sticks that you've got to do at the same time. So you're playing those chords. You've got to really be coordinated with that. And he went and learned that. And he was really, really good at it. It was a lot of practice and stuff. And so he played when the band would play football, games at halftime, things like that, and concert band. But they also had what they call drumline, which was competition. So they would go in the winter, they would go to different schools and areas, and they'd compete. Like, there'd be about 12 other high schools there with their drum lines, and they would go through a routine. And some of them were just out because they would costumes, makeup. I mean, it was like a full production. Wow. And a lot of them are, there's some that are really good, and they were great. They won first place a few times. And I mean, when I grew up, I was in drum and bugle corps. So in 8th grade and 7th grade, I was in a couple different corps and learned, it was like military style, marching and playing. I played baritone horn because I played trombone before that. So for me, it was great to see that again, and then the kids were kind of like introduced to real drum corps, which is crazy now. It's so intense, but anyway, he went through that in the high school, and it was great because the school systems here are great in Woodland Hills. So
hold on a second. How did you feel as Avery was experiencing all these things that you could reminisce on, and you had some of the same experiences? How did that make you feel as his dad?
It was great because I was able to relate to it and feel like confident in that. I'm not a sports guy. I never played sports or anything like that. And Case, my wife, was. I mean, when I was on the road, she was the one taking them to ice hockey and games and stuff like that. And so she was, it's funny because she was very, what's the word for it? She was a great, she really kept them in there. She had more of an insider type of motivation for the kids, as far as sports, which I was at games and stuff. Whenever I was at home, I'd come to games and everything like that. But I never played sports when I was a kid. I always played music. And the thing was, I never discouraged them or from anything. It was more about encouragement. So they were playing hockey. Avery was playing hockey as well as being in band. And sometimes you'd have, clashes and things like that. So I was, as far as music and him, I was very confident, and I knew that I could introduce him to so many different things, rather than just whatever pop music the kids were listening to. I could, he'd come in the studio and we'd start playing, like I said, orchestral, classical music, jazz. I started introducing him to jazz and different types of things. I said, get a wide spectrum of what music can be and influence your expression and things like that, because I could tell Avery was starting to get into, his own composition and things like that as it went along. And
now, there's research that shows that classical music is the preferred music for the gifted brain, especially for children and especially for young people who are agitated or have high sensitivities, that playing classical music that's not synthesizer, that's the actual instruments, actually helps harmonize and heal the brain. And so I say that all the time to people, and they go, classical, and I go, yes, it's so good for the brain, nourishes the brain. So
I can understand that. There was a book that I read. It was Escher, Bach, and something. It was a combination of basically mathematics. If you look at or listen to Bach, the fugues and things like that, they're very mathematical in how they're put together. And the structure of it is so beautiful, and it sounds so beautiful. It's very complex, and I think that when you're listening to things like that, your mind is kind of dissecting those things and seeing how those movements work within each other. So I definitely can understand that it nourishes that part of the brain that can understand those things, but they're kind of abstract and they're not in a sense of words or or anything else, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah. That's really cool. That's excellent. So tell us about your younger son. Now he's a little bit behind Avery because he's younger. So when was his click?
His click, it's funny because he had a couple. So I always was interested in photography. I always had a camera since I can remember. And I always, I had taken, before digital, I'd always take pictures with film and stuff like that. And I got like this mini Contax camera, which for some reason now is like really sought after. It's a T2. It's like people are paying outrageous prices for it. I gave mine to Noah, and he uses a lot. It's a film, 35 millimeter. But I would take pictures on the road and I wanted to take black and white in order to get black and white photos done. It's really expensive, but they said, hey, look, we'll take they took black and white and they ran it through they took color film and ran it through black and white processing. It came out like these sepia tone things. Mm-hmm. They're less expensive. Rather than paying $30 for a roll, I'm still paying like $8, So, but for Noah, musically, it was, I have a really great analog playback system here, turntable and speakers and stuff like that. It's, I took a lot of care in putting together kind of like a vintage set of things. So they came in one day, him and his friend, and they were listening to bands like Kings of Leon and stuff like that at the time. So I had bought a really nice vinyl copy of one of their popular records at the time, and I said, "Come in here and listen to this here," because most kids will never hear an analog system, which is completely different than anything digital or MP3s or any of that stuff we're streaming. So they came in and I put the record on, and their minds were blown. They were just like, because it's hard to. I have theories behind the difference between digital and analog and how your brain processes that. Very very quickly. Digital is ones and zeros, so sound that's coming out of a CD is coming at you at 44,000 bits per second. So, and your brain has to assemble that because it's not smooth. It's not a wave. It's these bits that are number bits that are coming at you. Whereas analog is a wave and it's smooth. Your brain does it. And for me, the first time, if you listen to analog for the first time that you haven't listened to digital, your brain just relaxes. It's like you don't have to. You feel like there's not all this work going on. So that was his musical thing. He got into photography more. He got into more of the filmmaking first. So it was the video camera for him, and making films before high school. And I'd help him edit some things and stuff because there wasn't like really much digital editing or anything like that. So it was kind of like bouncing between recorders and stuff. So
right.
So he would do that, and then what happened was in high school, it was great because they had a media department.
Right.
Different from the music department. It was all filmmaking, TV production, broadcast, news. They had a news channel there and stuff. So he got involved with that right away, and just like that was it for him. So they had a really good film department, and they would take the kids every year up to Seattle. They had a student film festival, international film festival. So had students coming in from all over the world for this film festival, and they would go in and there were competition for different genres and things like that. So he was always entered in films, and through when Noah started doing the films there, Avery was a senior, and he started doing all the soundtracks for all the student films. His brother was like, "Oh man, my son." Then because Avery was doing. That's when he started composing, and started doing the music for films, and he learned on the computer programs that you can do music for, and learn that type of production, and then Noah, gradually got into from digital editing, everything
Right.
on computers and stuff like that, and technology for kids, they just like took off on it. It was like because I was started teaching Avery some of the programs that I use for music composition and production like that, and within a year he was like. He was showing these stuff, and they picked that up different. I had to pick it up as it was developing. So, I started in like 83, when the first Macintoshes came. Actually, I had before the Macintosh, I had an Apple IIe that I started doing music
I
on.
remember those computers.
Yeah. The floppy disk was
Yep.
floppy. It was like this piece of plastic that was really, and you
Floppy.
floppy disk, exactly. And so I grew up with the technology and learned it as it grew. But these kids are coming in at the point where it's like really complicated, but for some reason they can grasp it easier, and they just, and they apply it really well, and so the both of them, Noah was learning from his, and his friends were kind of, he gravitated toward the people who were doing that type of thing of editing on computer, the video stuff that had to be transferred in. And music is a lot easier on a computer because it's commands that you do where you're telling an instrument to play. Video, it's like you have to import all of that data, visual data over. And if you want a good resolution, it takes a long time. It takes a lot of space, so you got to have a decent system that's fast and large enough to accommodate these type of things. Right. And so they both really kept up with the technology. And through that, like, after high school, Avery went on to, he studied at the film school in Los Angeles, the recording department, and he learned the recording arts there. And, he graduated like first in his class. And he went on, he did an internship at a studio. I know a guy who owns this studio called Studio City Sound, and it's great because he's just so eclectic. He has everybody in from heavy metal, rap to nuns recording there, and he's just I've never seen this guy in a bad mood. And I just said, Avery, I said, go to this guy, work there, because you're going to have, it's going to be a really good experience for you, as opposed to working at some place where somebody's just, get coffee, it's just hard. I've seen places where it must be horrible to work at, but this was really cool. So he wound up getting it, working there as an intern. And then they brought him in, they hired him as as an engineer and things like that. And then he took the film scoring course at UCLA, the extension course. So he went through that where you would write. I did the same thing. You'd write out. They give you a scene and you score it for like a small section, say a string section. And then you go to a studio and they bring in a string section, and each composer, you get a rehearsal with them, and then you'd record it twice, so each student was able to record that, and you had to conduct. So you had to conduct your session. So you learned a lot. It was, and he went through that, and he learned a lot. So he's able to, he scored a couple of movies where he's able to bring in, orchestral players and had record them. And then Noah just started. He started doing video work for people. He actually started doing like music videos. So there was some young guys that were up and coming that I don't know how they got together, but it was like friends of friends and this and that. I'll do a video for you, this and that. And, he was lucky enough to hook up with some very, very talented musicians and one rapper in particular, and started doing video, and the videos were amazing. So, he learned how to, what to direct, what crew members he needed. He had a really good group of crew guys who he grew up with, so like he went more into film direction and some cinematography. And then a lot of his friends went into lighting, so he had a guy who knew lighting and knew what to bring in and all that. Another guy was a colorist. So after it was done, he could bring this guy to, and they could color the film and stuff like that. And so both of them met, well, I think Avery met first, went up to Seattle to the film festival and met a Canadian kid who had a film in the festival. And they hooked up and they were like, oh, we should work together and stuff, So he went back. He was in Calgary or Vancouver, I think, at the time. He was living in Vancouver and his family was from Calgary. And so, he called up, he said, hey, can you do some background music for this, And the guy, Kurt, he was making videos for Compassion, which is a group that sponsors, poor kids in different countries and things like that. And he was doing the videos, and Avery started doing the music with him. And he took Avery on a trip. They went to Dominican Republic to an orphanage where he was going to film there. And Avery got the taste of the real situation there, so it was real. You could see it and stuff. So he was able to come back and be, inspire that, turn that into whatever the soundtrack was going to be for that. And then the kid finally got, investors together and wanted to do a film and asked Avery to score it. So he's been working with this guy for years now. I think he scored about 3 or 4 of his films. And, he does a lot of, shorts and things like that. And he's also doing editing for like a big interview podcast that's on, they have their own channel or whatever, but, he's working, a lot. He's making, he's making money at it. He's doing, that's what he's doing. And the thing that I kind of always, my expression with them is that, if you can do something that you love, it's never work, it's like such a blessing that if you can actually do something that you want to do, and both of them kind of went into a thing where they never had any other jobs, it was kind of like they just stayed with this and went. And I encourage that, my parents did the same thing, and what happened was my parents took a lot of crap from all of their brothers and sisters. How can you let this kid do, play? I was 15, 16, I was playing in bars. How can you let him play in bars? They were, and my parents had to defy them and say, no, this is what we want for him. They were so encouraging for me. And they never kind of, you can't do this. You got to like get a real job or something like that. And so I kind of went with them. I said, hey, you can go to school or you can try to find, you got to work doing something. And they were able to find the work of what they do, and they're doing that now. And I always felt, encouragement, because that's what I got,
Right,
and it was, it was a funny situation because my sister has a daughter and she wanted to go and go into theater arts and study at a college, theater arts and stuff. I know my sister was saying, you need something to fall back on. That was always the term that all the parents, you need something to fall back on, like get a teaching degree or something like that to fall back on, and I told my sister, I said, darling, I said, if mom and dad had been so, like strict and said, no, you're not going to play in clubs and things like that, I would have never moved to where, got to where I was. I mean, I was so lucky to be there. Not a lot of people have any kind of, thing where they can actually make a living playing music. So we had a discussion about that, and she let her child do that and wound up doing, and that's hard as hell, acting and theater arts and stuff like that. There's no guarantee, but I think if the child that doesn't have the opportunity to do that is going to look back and say, oh, what if,
Right.
So I never wanted to have them have to feel that way. And that's, you're not going to feel that way. It could wait till your 30s, 40s, 50s, something like that, before you start thinking, I really, really had this in my heart and I was never able to do that,
Right.
And,
I'm working with a 16-year-old now, and he's won all kinds of state thespian competitions and everything. And when I first started working with him, he's 14.
Right.
And his parents were like, we just want him to have a gifted mentor as he goes through high school and into college. So he has somebody in his corner, and he's gone through some depression here and there, and he's had challenges like all of us have.
Yeah.
And I remember I was just reflecting on this the other day that he's like, I don't know if I ever want to do like a musical, like singing and dancing. I can't do that. He can act like no other. His favorite is Shakespeare soliloquies at 14, and he could deliver. It was really good. And I'm like, oh. And every time he'd go to a competition, the judges would all go, what did they put on there? Cash and dollar signs. Like, that's how good he was, right? So now, though, he did his first musical, and it was a school rendition of Grease. And so, he got to do a little dancing and a little singing, and now he's hooked. And he's getting ready to go to state competitions and just won all kinds of things. And his parents are very much into have something to fall back on. And I'm the voice that says, we don't need to have anything to fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
He's gifted. He has tons of talents. He's got, the highest GPA you can have in the school. He's in a private school His grades aren't suffering. He's on the swim team. He's doing this, he's doing that. And this is where his passion lies. So let it go. And now the parents are much more relaxed and like, this is what he's falling back on. This is the fallback thing, the thing that's bringing him joy and that he's excelling in, because they also support him. So they give him all the resources that he needs. You want a singing coach, or you want to go to this, camp or whatever to learn whatever it is. If they can do it, they do it. And I said, well, so then just take away the fear of what if you can't, and just see where it goes. He'll tell you where it's going, so that's really delightful to hear that your parents did that for you and you're doing that for your boys, that.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. And the thing is that there's so many niches that you can find, and you have to be observant and look around and see, Avery's case, when he was starting to compose, I said, look, you've got a lot of knowledge of your knowledge is pretty wide as far as you know how to record, you know how to mix, you know how to balance things, and you can do that. So he does. He'll go and do a live sound at a shoot. He'll do sound editing. He'll do scoring. He'll actually do like Foley sessions. So he'll come and do that. So his talent is and his what he has experience in is really wide. So he can do a bunch of different things. So because in any of these fields, it's kind of like you got to look for work, and it's never a steady thing. Luckily, he's found something that is steady for him. So he's kind of spread that out. So it's going to, you can kind of pick and choose. Well, I don't feel like doing the sound for this. I'd rather score this or something like that. And Noah's the same way. So he's doing music videos. He's done a couple of films. They both have films that are on Amazon now and stuff. But he'll do a lot of photography now. So he's starting to do his own kind of art photography. He does a lot of street photography and things like that. And we talk about that because, I love doing that. I've done a lot of photography and different types of things. And so we kind of discussed that. And one thing that we've been discussing lately is that, it's easy to photo, like I can photograph, you can go and photograph a landscape or something that's static, that's just there, but it's beautiful at the moment, And I said, I love these photographers who really got the candid people shots, really got close to him. And he's experimenting with what other photographers do. There's some photographers who actually, as they're walking, they'll go right up to a person's face and with a flash and snap, things like that. And you get these crazy type of things, and I do it in a hidden way too. I have a camera that I hang down here. And as I'm walking, it's not up here, but I have it aimed, and I'll just take a variety, it's digital. I can take as many as I want. And start taking, pictures of people as I'm walking by or things like that. So they don't see that I've got a camera up at my face. So he's starting to do that too with different formats. He's got, medium format cameras and things like that. So he's starting to do that. He's done a lot of portraits and things for people.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So he's great. Yeah.
So what do you have? What would be some words of encouragement or advice that you would give other dads?
You kind of have to, well, not have to, but encouragement is always the thing. And a lot of times you might not understand what they're going after, and maybe they don't understand what they're going after, and then to kind of, do your homework, learn about, if they're into a certain thing, find out about it, if a kid's into, he wants to learn how to mix or how to, record or how to, be a director of photography and things like that. There's so many resources you can go to look at what they are, and schooling as well. That's, you can look at different schools where they can go and really, because there's nothing like that. I mean, Avery learned so much from going to the LA Film School and stuff. And Noah was looking at different places, and he learned so much on his own that he was taking classes at college, and he's saying, I know all this stuff. Why am I, because I'm paying for this. I already know this, and so there's a lot of resources for them to learn as well. But it's great to know what they actually want to do, And it's hard sometimes because, even in the arts, if kids like, so many kids who want to get to just be a musician or they want to be a songwriter or things like that. And I always say, tell them to listen and not just to what they like, but get them out, broaden their, spectrum of what they listen to, to take that in and have an open mind, because a lot of people's minds are just shut, to where they want to believe or what they want to think is good. And you've got to open that up and be open to those type of things. But, understand what they like, and then, explore together, because then you got something, you can discuss with them, oh, what this artist, and I've taken them to so many concerts. We used to go to Coachella all the time together, and take them to, there's bands I like that, I mean, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, there's what's that one band we went to see? There's no drummer, it's just guitar and bass. Like they have like hundreds of amps on stage, right? And it's just this, thing up. And they were playing in Los Angeles. And the thing I read about it is that they were saying this is a physical experience because the sound pressure is so intense that it just, your body, something happens to your body. So I said, we got to go do this, And we had earplugs in just so we wouldn't damage our ears and stuff, But so we go to, I'll go to all kinds. We go to, Disney Hall. We'll see classical performances, jazz performances and like avant-garde artists and stuff like that. So they need to take that in order for them to, in anything. I think, if you're into film, like, even with Noah, we discuss, I used to go to New York when I was like 16 or 17, like 3 times a week and go see foreign films. I just have that love for film as well. And so I was able to, say, check this director out, check this, not anything that's playing now. There's so many people, French, Russian directors, and some of their films are just outstanding. And I said, check this out. And you get all of a sudden they get a vision of something that isn't pop or, and I actually, my thing is like, why imitate when you should, be inventive? You should invent your own, my thing was hybrids. It was always like, let's take classical and let's see if we can combine the jazz and elements into that, or take, so my thing was hybrids. You should try to combine those different elements and stuff. And that's what they get when they go out and explore, because all of a sudden they'll see something that a director does, or they'll see something that a musician is doing, and then fuse it with something that, they're coming up with or what have you, rather than chasing after, it's good to know how these people do things, but, if you're chasing after this guy's vision, his vision was probably, from somebody else who liked, this guy back in the 50s, and you see that in influence all the time, but you can actually go back to the original influence that happened and draw from that, and a lot of people aren't exposed to that, because it's, they're not aware of it,
Right. So being open-minded and really supporting like the expansion,
yes,
instead of being so rigid. I think that's a really, really good piece of advice for fathers with their sons, especially, and with their daughters too. But because I think like my parents were very open-minded. My brother and I could do whatever we wanted as long as we were happy.
Yeah,
we had unconditional support.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes my brother used to he used to actually cry at some points for more structure, because my mother was raised in such an overly structured home. It was like, I'm not going to be that structured, so she went way the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's always that balance of being open-minded and allowing expanse, but then having a container. And that's what I'm hearing you say, is that you had a really healthy container as their dad, like your studio here. Let me play the analog version of what you love. Let's look at what's going on. Let's explore all these things, taking them to concerts. And so there was a container that was loosely held so that they had safety to experience and experiment. And they had you there with them as part of that experience. It wasn't them alone trying to figure it out. Like, I think there's lots of places in there that are so natural to you that are really good models for how, if you want your kid to go somewhere or do whatever it is and follow their dream, you have to kind of be willing to walk it with them and have a good time with them and explore and be open. And that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny when you say the container too, because like I said, my wife cases, I've been on the road for most of their lives, and her container was, to teach them manners and be polite and be respectful and all those things, which they learned, because you see there's a lot of kids out there that aren't, and they're very talented, I've run across that all my life, very talented people who are just, you can't be around them. They're just like, they have no social skills, or they're just so rude, or, whatever. But because I've teach both of them as far as, look, when you were the client and they're paying you, your personal taste is not what's going to dictate it. It's going to be what they want, and you have to see what they want if you're working for somebody else, and that's basically like a lot of us. I was a sideman, and as a composer, you're composing for a certain person or a company, what have you. So they've got to learn that, and then they take what my wife taught them as far as respect, manners, being and they've got that. That was the thing I was really proud of, how she taught them that, because they were with adults and things like that. They're very, very polite and respectful, and people told us that, and that's really such a great thing when you hear your kids are so polite, and you're like, oh man, that's so important.
Because they had a safe container and the ability to practice and do whatever it is they needed to learn, manners, music, whatever it is, between you and your wife being able to pay attention and offer that safety for them. And I think that safety really, really matters.
When you say safety,
safety as in that they can screw up and they're still going to be loved. They can do great. They're still going to be loved. They could try this and it may not work, but they're still going to be loved. And then there's discipline, like, here, look at it this way, do it this way. No, and correction and support in a loving way so that they could learn the highest and best way to do things. That's what I mean by safety.
Yeah. So yeah. And sometimes you just got to let them go. And, when you're getting involved with them, it's like, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do, you have to just, all right, do what you feel you should do here, even though that, that it's going to be, could be a disaster, potential disaster. They got to learn that,
Right.
So, but then you can also find something that's like, wow, I never thought that, you'd be able to come up with that, with different things and stuff, so they need to know that they're being creative in things that haven't been done yet, say, out of the box, doing things. I mean, that's when I grew up with the technology. I always used it in a way that wasn't supposed to be used, push it. And
so
because you come up with some, you're bound to, first of all, you're going to come up with some that doesn't sound like anybody else, and you've personalized that. So, because you're using something that's totally wrong way to do it, I mean, they've done that for years. Take in recording, you take a tape and flip it upside down and do things and flip it over and speed it up and slow it down. So, I mean, that's how that electronic music, avant-garde music, started with that. You weren't supposed to do that, but that's what you did.
And so you're a maverick at heart. And that's how it is that you've created this really cool success in your own world and lots of different things, from photography and music and composing and all kinds of things. And you have two really amazing creative adult sons that are forging their own really neat creative path.
It's interesting because I forgot to mention this. When they were young, right? And I'd always imagine, like, I go to the gym or I'm on a cycle or whatever, and I'm saying, man, wouldn't it be great, like, one day the three of us like doing something together, in this, whatever it was. It was really a fantasy for me, and I would envision that all the time.
Right.
And there's been great situations where I look and it's like, whoa, this is something the three of us did. It was really fun. Whether it be a movie or a song, I've written with Avery, and we've had our songs picked up, licensed out to cosmetic companies and MTV use it, or, and all of that. It was something we did together. And the one thing, this is a great story. So I'm up at Rod's house, and we're coming up with ideas for a record, different song ideas and things like that. And I had a piece that Avery wrote, and it's funny, we mentioned Blue Nile because it sounded just like Blue Nile, the piece. I knew that he'd like latch onto it. So I started playing it for him, and he goes, oh, wait a minute. He went and got his lyric book, and he had lyrics about the last train home when he was young. In London, the trains would stop at 10 o'clock. So if you didn't catch that last train and you were like 30 miles out of town, that's it, So, he wrote the song Last Train Home about him, trying to get on that last train home. And it wound up getting recorded, and it wound up on the album. It's funny because, it's him and Avery as the writers on the thing. And it wound up on a like a special edition or something like that, like for,
Right.
Or it was like a bonus track.
Right.
But still, I'm like, Avery, you got, your resume, you got to, there's a co-write with just you in it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So like, that's cool. And that is one of those neat things where when you allow yourself and your children to follow the vision, and then you pay attention, and you've said this several times, and I'm going to reiterate for all of you who are listening to this, and that is to be open and pay attention to what the opportunities are, what's happening, so that you can seize opportunities or create an opportunity. And that's what happened with that song. You created the opportunity in that neat way, and it worked.
Yep.
So that's important, I think. I think that's very, very important. So have you had any challenges with being the dad of these two great creative kids, and and all the travel you've had and all of that? Have there been any like really big challenges that you guys have had to overcome in your relationships?
It varies, because here's the thing. Now, we talk about when a parent is trying to instruct a kid on something, it's so different than when an outsider's doing it. It's kind of like teachers and things like that. So a lot of times it'd be like, maybe you should go in this direction, or here's a suggestion. And the immediate response is, no, because I'm the dad. And it's like easy for them to say to me, you don't know what you're talking about, or, but if it's somebody else, it could even be a friend or another, another grown up in the industry or something like that. They could say the same thing to him.
Word for word even, and they'd go, yeah.
Okay, I'll try that. Yeah. So, that's always the challenge. That continues on. But that's the same. You've seen it in bands with brothers, who just like, just beat the hell out of each other or something like that. Look at Oasis. It was, you'd have fist fights. And you'd think that, but the amazing thing is these two work well together, because they worked on films together and stuff like that. And I haven't seen any of the, clashing or anything like that. Maybe it was, that I haven't seen it, but as far as that goes, so that's something that, it's hard not to take personally, so, but I have to let that go and say, he's just doing it because he's my son. He's a kid. And what kids don't want to rebel against their parents at a certain age, especially in adolescence and growing up and stuff like that. So a lot of times there can be times that they don't listen, where they don't want to take your suggestion. So you kind of, you got to be prepared for that, and just let go of it and say, yeah, because it's, it's whatever. Because I could try to beat it into them, but that's not gonna learn anything by that.
No,
There's something I'll have to, to do it halfway and like, see, I told you it wasn't gonna work, type of thing. So,
right, and that's that container again. Like you have enough space, and I'm here for you, and I have some ideas, and sometimes other people might say the same exact thing, and it's not personal about you. It's them finding their way, which is really, really beautiful.
Yeah, because a lot of times when that happens, it's like, and then like a day or two later, oh, can you show me how to do this? They'll come back because it's in, they need your help. They want to ask for the help rather than you just like pushing it at them all the time.
Right. I have a client that I work with whose daughter is around the same age as your son's, and and she is getting into music, and he's a well-known musician. And
Yeah.
she at one point was like, I hate you because I hate our last name, because I have to live up to your reputation.
Oh. Hmm.
And she didn't really hate him, but that was the 15-year-old, like, didn't know how to say how hard it is to live up to the last name, to their name.
Why was it, like a name that brought,
Fame, lots of fame.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And everybody was comparing her voice to her dad and blah blah blah.
Right.
Well, so then he had I think a really powerful response, and he says, well, okay, I want to support you and help you, and I'm happy to give you all my contacts, which most people would die for this person's book.
Mhm.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
But she wanted her own name, and I totally, and both of us got that. And so he said, we use your first and middle name. You have a beautiful name, just use that.
Yeah.
You don't have to use the last name.
Mhm.
And then you have your own identity.
Right.
And if you want anything from me, I'm happy to do it for you. And if not, I'm still going to cheer you on and love you. And things have gone very smoothly since then. The moment there was that appreciation of her own identity, and and he has his own identity too, and they're very different. But they have done some things together. They've done some music together, performed together too.
That's great.
The moment that she could see that it's okay, like she had to know it was okay, because that's how teenagers are. It's totally cool. It was really neat. But I loved how he handled it. There was not this fighting back and forth. It was, well, why don't you do it this way? And it was very loving. And I think that kind of kindness and loving while the kids find their way, and that it all works out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
I experienced a similar situation when I was doing Julian Lennon's first tour, and his first record had come out, and it was, you talk about comparisons.
Yeah, yeah.
He did sound like his dad. I mean, that was the thing that everybody that attracted people to it. He was very talented in his writing and things like that. But immediately he's like, oh my God, I gotta see this. He sounds like his dad and stuff. And he had to live with that for a long time, and that's hard for somebody, especially if maybe they didn't have a good experience with their parent. This is a parent, you're somebody whose father died, was murdered.
Yeah.
And now he's got to live up to something. He can't even talk to him about it. So
right.
It was a lot. I give that guy so much credit, for, coming through that,
right.
having to deal with that. That was a really extreme case, but I can understand that, and it's great that parent was, behind him,
Right.
doing it.
And yeah, so I think that really matters, that actually listening and hearing and having compassion and flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to all the young people listening to you who wish they had parents, a dad like you, or maybe they have a message for their dad, like, listen to this guy. He believes in his kids. You can believe in me. Or, cool, my dad believes in me too, like this dude does, because we'll have all different people listening to us. What would you want to say to the teenagers, to the kids in their early 20s who are finding their way? What would be some advice maybe, or a word of wisdom that you might want to share with?
I would say, as much as the parent's going to try to understand you, that's the one thing that young people, and I'm included in that, is never thought of what sacrifice they're making emotionally or anything like that, is try to understand their point of view, so whether it be you think you're being punished by something, or being told something that you don't want to hear, a word of advice or something, just having be open-minded and having the back of your mind of that. If they're doing something encouraging, is to appreciate it. If they're doing something disciplinary, appreciate that too, even though you might not like it, but they're doing it, for a reason, for your well-being. So just I think try to grasp onto their point of view, however, how little or how much you want to go with it, but realize that, because that's going to help with, with the communication between the two. Yeah, I think, as far as, that would be my kind of take on it. If you're, dealing with your parents is try to understand that. It's hard. I mean, especially if you're an adolescent, you don't know anything about adulthood or anything like that. You got to realize that they've been through that type of thing, you
Right.
know, so I guess, I think that would be kind of helpful,
Yeah, everybody has something they're dealing with, parents included, kids
Yeah,
included, everybody.
yeah.
All right, well, y'all, you've been listening to Chuck Kentis, and you've already heard him on episode 238. And if you didn't listen to that, you probably want to go listen to that because you learn about his career, his musical career, or good part of it. We didn't cover the whole thing. It's not possible. This would be like an audio book to cover everything that Chuck has done. But we did cover a lot of really fun, exciting things. And so in this episode, I hope that you're walking away from this episode listening to Chuck talk about these things with hope and inspiration and permission to support and encourage in a really amazing manner your children and the other young people that you have influence over, not just your own biological children. So, Chuck, I want to thank you for being here and being willing to candidly talk about these things from just a real practical life experience and how your boys and you have done it and your wife has done it and all of you have put this together. And that's really amazing. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for asking. It's, like I said, I love your show and what you do for other people. If this can help other people, because I do have a lot of parents who ask me those type of questions with their kids who are going into the arts and stuff, if we've helped them, I think that's fantastic. So I thank you for allowing me to be part of that. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So remember, everybody, put your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you because you're a rock star and you're here on purpose with a purpose. So let your light shine. Go do it. Till the next episode, if someone gets me, be well.
Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episode's, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.